Hi, and welcome to our session, Leading for Transformation Using Identity to Improve Practices, Processes, and Outcomes. We're the Network for College Success at the University of Chicago, and our team will be introducing ourselves in just a moment. We want to take you through an activity first entitled Identity Maps. And you'll find this resource in the app. This comes from Liz Kleinrock, who is an anti-bias and anti-racist educator for both children and adults. And she works in designing inquiry-based units of study. And so now I'm going to invite our team to introduce ourselves through our personal identity maps. An identity map is a graphic tool used to share, learn, and reflect on the aspects that shape who we are. Identity maps honors our unique personal experiences and can be used by anyone who's seeking to build self-awareness and connection with others. My name is Ria Predikin, and I'm a Filipino American. I'm a mom, a wife, a daughter, and breaking generational cycles in one multi-generational interfaith household. I'm a coach, an educator in Chicago, and I was born and raised in Los Angeles.
Hi, I'm Kate Pressler. I am a white woman born and raised in the Midwest who is unmarried and has no children by choice, but is a proud daughter, aunt, sister, cousin, and niece.
Hi, my name is Andrea. I'm a Mexicana who is descendant of the Purepecha Mochi Chile. I am a Chicago Little Village lifelong resident. I was raised by a community of activists, and I am a lifelong learner and educator.
You have full autonomy over your identity, and no one can tell you what parts of yourself you can or can't claim. No one can tell you what words to use to identify because no one knows what it's like to exist in your own body. We want to share this quote because we want to reference what it means by doing mirror work. We'll reference that term throughout this presentation. And at NCS, it is about the individual exploration of how one shows up, how one thinks, how one acts and interacts. It includes the exploration of your core beliefs, your values, your non-negotiables, your priorities that you bring to any important decisions or actions in your life. And we're going to give you some individual think time to create your own identity map. Again, it is in the resources for our presentation, and you'll find a blank identity map there. We want you to think about the identities that are most important to you, understanding who you are, and consider the way that you share these identities with others. Think about your own personal belief systems and your cultural understandings, and ask yourself how noticeable this identity marker is for you as you move around the world. How might the things on this identity map affect the decisions you make? So I invite you to pause this recording that you're watching and think about your identity markers. I want to take a moment to introduce the Network for College Success and who we are. The Network for College Success, this is our vision and our mission. And the Network for College Success works to cultivate post-secondary readiness and success for all students by translating research into practice and supporting high school leaders to organize their schools for improvement and innovation. At NCS, we partner with educators, school leaders, and districts to build transformational high school experiences for young people. We work intentionally with administrators, educators, teachers, counselors, other school staff in the building to shift perspectives and habits that will lead to conditions for transformational leadership, to guide their efforts to continually improve school performance, equity practice, and post-secondary readiness. Our work starts by focusing on the development of new mindsets that enable our educators to see their work differently through collaboration and trust, through data, and through equity-centered mindsets. We will reference the Counselor and Coach Collaborative, for short we'll say CCC, and that is a group of counselors and college career coaches that started in about 2010. At NCS, we really partner by learning from one another. By being a part of the NCS network, our educators belong to a larger community of professionals each year who share their experiences and work together to improve their practice. And so I do want to point out that This learning community, the CCC, is where most of our teams work, our post-secondary team, our work takes place. And the work that we will highlight today in our presentation took place within the CCC community. Within our CCC community, we really took a developmental approach to post-secondary success. Our work has been built on the information gained from the Potholes on the Road to College report, and we've also used the Foundations for Young Adult Success report, the book Ready, Willing, Able, and also the book Learning to Improve. We also took from the research from the Search Institute to inform our work and our theory of action. We found that the missing piece to post-secondary work and success was the developmental approach. It's the knowledge of adolescent development. It's providing developmental experiences for young people and forming developmental relationships. And when we think about the experiences and the outcomes for young people, we define success in life as being successful means having the agency to make active choices about one's life's path, possessing the competencies to adapt to the demands of different contexts, and incorporating different aspects of oneself into an integrated identity. In the year 2020, we had the pandemic start. There was the racial reckoning in America, and it really took a toll on our schools, our educators, and our young people. We shifted to virtual learning. A lot of people were in isolation, and it took a toll on people's mental health. We really centered the work of social emotional learning and the identity work that needed to take place with our community as we began our work in the CCC. And for today's session, we want to go over our learning objectives that participants will ground themselves in a team's improvement science journey to support a network improvement community of educators to grow their leadership and embrace continuous improvement through an identity-based lens. We'll also learn how a community of educator leaders work to improve their practice through exploring their own identities and mindsets and making behavior changes based on student voice data on developmental relationships to support their students' post-secondary preparation. We wanted to take a moment to bring in the lived experiences and voices of our community from the CCC, the college career coach at Crane Medical Prep. Karen Gibbs is one of our long-standing community members in the CCC. And we invited our community members to tell us about what connections they see between the mirror work and improving post-secondary advising. So we'll hear from Karen Gibbs.
It was the mirror work for me that helped me realize that because of the years that I've spent in post-secondary higher ed, that I really needed to take a step back because there are some generational differences between myself and the students that I serve in terms of age. And so what once was when I was going to college and what is now, the landscape looks very different. And without that mirror work, I don't think I would be able to connect with the students that I serve now. There's not only an age difference between myself, a significant difference between myself and the students I serve, but there is a bit of a difference between my colleagues as well. So when we don't necessarily see eye to eye on things, I have to take a step back and realize that this is not the landscape that I once lived in, but it has changed dramatically. And the mirror work has also helped me to understand that some students would find me unapproachable. And so I had to take a step back and figure out, what is it about me that makes them apprehensive, or in some cases, maybe intimidated or afraid? And I realized that I'm very matter of fact when I speak to them, because generally I'm asking them to do something. And so I had to tone that down somewhat. And
Thank you, Ria, for that introduction. And of course, we always appreciate our practitioner voices being incorporated, and Karen does a great job of really illustrating how bringing the mirror work has helped her to improve her practices. So we want to go into a little bit more detail of telling our story of how we as a team have weaved the mirror work in improvement science into our coaches and counselors and coaches collaborative. Organizationally at NCS, we were charged with incorporating improvement science into our work. We were charged with not only applying it to our own practices as leading this collaborative in our own coaching, but also bringing it to the community that we worked with of how they could apply it to improving their own practices. So we were really learning together. But however, as a team, we had been using this developmental approach in our work and had been using identity work for many years. So we wanted to do this in a way, incorporate the improvement science work in a way that felt true to us, doing it in a holistic way that centered the human, developmental, and behavioral approaches. So a little bit about how we did that. Our first iteration of really weaving the two together was we utilized multiple tools and resources to support our community to reflect on their identities in ways that would lead to identifying change ideas for improving their practice. So we did this through multiple ways, like the identity maps, looking at listening filters and how that and how their identity markers influenced how they showed up for their students. We looked at the developmental relationship framework and really focused on how to strengthen relationships with young people. We learned about the characteristics of white supremacy culture and how they can prevent barriers to improvement and how to break down those barriers. And we really tinkered with change ideas. A couple specific examples just to go in a little bit more detail. One of the things that we did, as we said, we were really trying to get to identifying specific change ideas. We started out with like, okay, we've got to get everyone to identify change ideas, run through PDSA cycles. And so we're like, how do we get our community to identify those change ideas? And we made this tool, this habit scorecard, which was adapted from James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, which gave our community members a chance to just reflect on what were their daily habits when they showed up at their school buildings throughout the day, and were those habits contributing to being the counselor or coach that they aspire to be in a positive or a negative or neutral way. And this helped some of our community members to identify specific habits or just little practices that they were doing throughout the day that they could change, make a small adjustment to, that could lead to an improvement in their work. And then as you see on the right side, we developed a change idea tracker, which this was a tool that we used throughout an entire school year to really try and help our community members identify those specific change ideas, thinking about what are you trying to improve, what do you hope will be the result of the change, and then also giving them time to reflect on whether or not a change was made or just what they learned through that process. I'm going to also now show you another example. We can go to the next slide. This is one of our community members, Bria Hudson, who's a counselor at Tilden High School here in Chicago. And she's going to model how she really reflected on her own after doing her own identity map and the different identity markers, and how each of those different identity markers impacts how she shows up for students. And just to give a little context setting, while you have access to this whole video in the app, we're going to be starting the video after she has already talked through each of her identity markers. You're going to hear one example of how she connects one of the identity markers to her advising practices, and then just kind of her overall reflections.
So I feel like all of these things play a part. First generation college student, I think it's key. Most of my students that I work with, if they decide to attend college, they are first generation college students. They will be first generation college students, or just first period in their families to participate in higher education. So working with them, being able to understand what the anxiety feels like, what the pressures are. So being able to make those connections and try to reassure them, but understand like you can you can't go away and be successful whether nobody else in your family has done it. So coming having that ideology in my mind and being able to not just and being able to have a couple other degrees beyond just the initial one, being able to show them, or when we are advising, like what that looks like, those fears, because I've had those fears as well. So I think all of these components, they shape who I am. They allow for me to be able to connect and make relationships with my students. And I think that's important when you're thinking about your identity beyond just your race, your ethnicity, I should say, your race and ethnicity. But how can you connect other aspects of your other aspects of who you are and being able to use that to connect with your students? Even if my students aren't Black, or they are Latino, Hispanic, white, Asian, whatever they are, there's something that they can pull. I can pull from each of these identities, and being able to use those with advising students, understanding students, and creating relationships. Because before you can even get into the advising, having that foundation and that relationship is key with advising students. Otherwise, it's a one-sided conversation. And when we're advising, we want to make sure that it's a conversation, but they're at the forefront of the conversation, and I'm just guiding them through this conversation. So I think it's important that we really look into our identities and do some soul searching within ourselves and figure out how we can make those connections, especially if we're in schools or communities or whatever facet that you're working in, and you might be struggling with making those connections with students. And we know at times that can be difficult, but really tapping into those things that are those similarities that you share with your students, or commonalities that you can bring those about to the forefront. And that will help with creating relationships, and then also being able to show them who you are, but also being able to advise them the best way that you see fit to help them towards their future goals.
So Bria's example also shows where our developmental approach that our community takes on when supporting post-secondary advising, as Ria talked about before, is grounded in foundations of our young adult success and helping to build our students' identity. But the work that we've been doing with our community has shown that as the adults and the practitioners working with students, the need of reflecting on their own identities helps them to better connect with their students and support their students. And so that's something that I think as a community, as you saw both from Bria and Karen's example, that real reflection on their own identities has only helped improve their connections and relationships with students, and thus their advising. So through this first iteration of weaving improvement science and identity work together, we certainly learned things. As we said, this was our own improvement journey of trying to figure out how to improve our own practices. And so we learned a lot also and took the time to reflect. A few of the things that we learned were that we need to lead with the why, not with the tools. We when we were learning about continuous improvement at first ourselves, it was a lot of the tools, the PDSA cycles, the fish bones, the interrelational diagrams. All of these things are super important and really purposeful, but we realize we can't lead with those, that we need to lead with the why and connect to why we show up and do this work, and then bring in the tools to support that. We also learned that our community's change ideas were too broad and disconnected. We did not have a common aim or a common area of improvement that everybody was creating change ideas for. And so it led to kind of them being all over the place and not having, common things that people were testing, which made it really hard to get specific and have it be a learning community, since everyone was kind of trying to do different things. We also learned that it was helpful to really push people and support people in redesigning their current processes instead of doing more or taking on new initiatives. And that was something that kind of required breaking down some behaviors and habits that they've just become so accustomed to, of just doing new things rather than just trying to get really simple and making little tweaks to things they were already doing. We also learned that we needed to go slow and scaffold, that we tried to present too much at first and trying to help our community just understand and learn about continuous improvement while also doing this reflection, while also coming up with change ideas, was too much. And so that we really had to slow down and scaffold and start bringing in the same learning repeatedly rather than trying to front load too much at first. And lastly, as always, we just remembered that we needed to connect to the human side and that we were always taking that holistic approach when thinking about continuous improvement.
Thank you, Kate, for walking us through our first phase and sharing some reflections about what we learned. We really wanted to take those lessons that we learned from phase one to strategize and plan how we were going to continue this work. So we, as facilitators, we're really passionate about curating spaces of interconnected learning and recentering the why. And so in phase two, we didn't want to introduce any new content at this point. Like Kate said, like we wanted to go slow and scaffold. So what we did is we brought back in those sources of research that Ria had mentioned earlier, and we wanted to go deeper with them. So what we did is that we engaged in a jigsaw protocol, and we chose a jigsaw protocol because there was a lot of learning that our community had to re-engage with in a short amount of time. So from the jigsaw protocol, our community, our counselor coach collaborative, they came up with areas of improvement, and that surfaced based off of what surfaced for them during the protocol. And to our excitement as facilitators, all the areas of improvement were about student advising. So we were really happy and really excited about that. To further connect and not lose what we had learned from phase one, we wanted to simplify things even more to avoid anything becoming too broad or too disconnected. So we took all those areas of improvement and we consolidated it into one area of improvement. We continued to weave the mirror work and that identity reflection into our convenings and collaboratives in a slow and purposeful way. And so as facilitators, we included those themes in the more technical pieces of the work in how we supported our community to create theories of action. So this is just an example of how we guided them through creating that. And we really wanted to live into the belief that those closest to the problem have the best solutions. And that meant for us as facilitators and coaches to give our community members more agency in the process, in the writing of their theories of action. And so that meant for us as facilitators, letting go of that perfectionism and letting them engage in the tools in the way that felt right for them in the moment for our community members. To again bring in the voices of our community, we wanted to share with you one of our college and career coaches, Candace Randall Jones from South Shore International College Prep. And here she is describing, what it meant for her to shift her thoughts around student advising by connecting with these technical tools and the mirror work that we had been bringing to our community.
Okay. Since I became a college and career coach back in, I don't remember what year, 2018 maybe. So I've been with CPS for 6 years. I have always recognized that it's a lot easier for me to connect with, build relationship with, and just sort of naturally support students who were the same type of student that I was. I recognize that, that kindred intrinsic motivation, the goal-oriented mentality that they have, and it's something that I recognize right away. And it's very easy for me to support that type of student because, for me, it's giving that student the type of support that I know that I needed. Where I see the challenge is supporting students, and I still do support all students, but it's a little bit more challenging, and I have to really find different avenues and methods to support students who are not similar to how I was, and to support students where I don't immediately find that connection. That's something that I've noticed since I've been a coach, but being part of the NCS community has helped me give language to what that is. So recognizing parts of my identity, doing the mirror work to recognize how my identity influences how I do my work, how it influences the ways in which I'm able to support students, and how it influences, how easy or difficult it is for me to do certain things and provide certain supports for students and families. That mirror work is the term that has really helped me recognize, okay, there are some times where I can leverage parts of my identity to help students where I have a more natural connection. And there are times where I have to challenge parts of my identity that make it difficult for me to support students in the same way and in the same capacity. I feel like that sounds like a bad thing to say, but I think it's a real thing to say that, every person is different, advisors and students alike, so adults and students alike. And sometimes it takes a little bit more work. Sometimes it takes a little bit more just professional development and practice and training, and really utilizing tools that we learn from professional developments to support a student in the same way that you could probably support a student who I feel like it comes more naturally to do.
So, and I thank Candace for her vulnerability. And I feel like this is an example of the sort of trust that we built in our community for us to have these conversations and to use mirror work to leverage and know areas of growth and also recognize areas of strength that we have as counselors and coaches. Wanted to share some more examples of some evidence and some shifts that have been changing or that have been happening at our schools. One of our partner schools, Thomas Kelly College Prep, through identity and mirror work, the post-secondary team was examining how they share power with students, and wanting to lean into sharing power with students even more. How they did is they organized themselves in a way where they utilized the American School Counselor Association lesson plan template to refine and improve their advising sessions. And they also used the ASCA template to be able to intentionally connect to mindsets and behaviors. And not only were they able to improve the way that they share power with students, but they were also able to address the unintentional siloing that can happen between post-secondary and counseling teams in schools. And since then, communication between counseling and post-secondary teams has improved. Another example from Crane Medical Prep, which is another partner school, you heard from Karen earlier in our session, and after reflecting about the generational gap that she has between herself and her students and herself and her colleagues, she made a change in her physical location in the building, from moving from the 4th floor to the 1st floor to help better build connections with students. And she made this change because she was having a difficult time connecting with certain students and completing the FAFSA. And since moving locations, she's actually been able to reach those students and complete FAFSA applications with them. And so this is an example where we saw improvement not by adding more things like more parent FAFSA nights, but by doing something differently. And so we're going to bring her voice into the space again.
Also changed my location in the building. And now I have students that will come and ask me questions simply because I am in a different office, and they feel more comfortable in the space where I am in the building now versus where I was at one time. And I was the only one in there. So I think if you cannot honestly look at yourself in the mirror and wonder why some students feel very comfortable and others are intimidated or a little apprehensive about talking to you, not that they think you're going to do anything bad to them, but there's something to be said when every time you go and get a student and they say, what did I do? Or they have this, what am I in trouble kind of look on their face when you're just trying to help them to move on to the next step. And so that's not an easy task to do, because it makes you do that inner reflection, and it makes you really look at the person in the mirror, and literally and figuratively to look at that person in the mirror to see, okay, what is it that in my posture, in my words, in my approach to this work that some students will find it welcoming, and then other students will find it intimidating. And so I need to get rid of that intimidation factor. I think my background has a little bit to do with it in terms of coming from higher ed, and crossing over into the high school area, the students are different.
Thank you, Karen. You know, in addition to our community, we shared a little bit of things, evidence of shifts and change in them, but us as facilitators, we also saw shifts and change in ourselves and how we facilitate as well as how we coach. We were able to get more clear and narrow with our area of improvement. We built space for more autonomy in the process, really letting our community members take ownership of what improvement looks like for them and in their schools. And we were transparent about our own learning. We were learning and doing with them. And by making that transparent, we were able to build trust. We also strengthen our coaching, our facilitation skills to support the integration of mirror work with the technical parts of improvement science. This mirror work is something that our team holds very valuable, and we didn't want to lose sight of that. And so we have been able to, you know, identify ways of weaving that into improvement science. We want to take you through some closing moves today. You know, by joining us today, we were hoping that you would ground yourselves in our team's improvement science journey to support a network of improvement community of educators to grow their leadership and embrace continuous improvement through an identity-based lens. We learned how a community of educator leaders worked to improve their practice through exploring their own identities and mindsets and making behavior changes based on student voice data and developmental relationships to support students' post-secondary preparation. And we want to leave you today with a little gift. We started out today by holding space for mirror work, by introducing identity maps and giving you all opportunities to reflect on your different identity markers. And so we want to leave you with a reflection question. What do you need to be able to lead this work in your system? And what kind of leader for equity will you commit to be? On behalf of the NCS post-secondary team, we want to thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much.